All right, so let's get started. So thank you guys for all coming tonight. We have about 152 attendees right now, and we have a group of panelists. I have about 15 or 20 slides I want to go through, and just really some updates on things that are going to be happening over the course of the next week and a half. Month and a half that I want to fill you all in on. Some real important information. It's not 100% solid yet. There's still a lot of moving parts that we need to figure out and get additional guidance from the Department of Ed, but I wanted to talk about kind of what's happening. My slideshow tonight has changed probably 3 or 4 times just in the last 24 hours since the commissioner announced that our learning model will be moving towards full in-person and not hybrid. So that's information that was new to me yesterday. I didn't get a heads up. I don't think any of us knew that was coming. In fact, I was in Mrs. Loftus's room talking to her about pool testing, and I got a ding on my phone saying, Commissioner to announce no more hybrid learning. I was out of the blue. So that was a huge surprise. So why don't we quickly just go through the panelists, just say your name, who you are, and just a quick introduction before I switch over to the slideshow. We start with Mr. Reed.
Okay, I'm Mike Reed from the school committee. So thanks for including me, Mr. Serrano, on this important topic tonight.
Thank you. Mrs. Colombo.
Laurie Colombo, school committee. Thank you very much for having me.
And then how about we go with our high school folks?
Hi, I'm Megan Lafayette. I'm the principal at the high school.
Thomas Forbes, one of the assistant principals at the high school.
I'm Joanne Masterson, the other assistant principal at the high school.
Great. Mrs. Lawrence.
I'm Mrs. Lawrence. I work as the assistant superintendent for student services for the district. Welcome.
Mrs. Rafferty.
Good evening. I'm Mrs. Rafferty. I am the Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment. I'm happy to be here tonight.
And how about our elementary folks?
I'm Emily Lurie. I'm the principal at Stallbrook.
I'm Miriam Friedman, the principal at the Petro.
Excellent. And I see Mr. Cutler is on. He doesn't realize that he's on as a panelist right now, but you are on, Mr. Cutler. You can open up your video and your mic when you're ready. All right, I am going to share my screen and we'll get started on the PowerPoint. All right. So again, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll try to get to them as quickly as we can. And there's some time at the end for additional questions. So just a quick update of what's going on. All right, so just some of the current strategies that we've been using since the beginning of the school year. And we've been working diligently all year to implement and maintain these health and safety precautions for our students and for our staff in our hybrid model. So we've been using our face masks, hand washing and sanitizing, distancing, air purifiers in classrooms where needed. Our students and our faculty have done a phenomenal job maintaining all of these health and safety precautions. I think I've said this in other meetings, been so impressed with how well our students adapted and persevered through these challenges. I think they've done an amazing job, especially with wearing face masks. I know when we first started talking about it, we were concerned that our younger students wouldn't be able to maintain a whole day with face masks on. They did a great job and they continue to. So really, really proud of all the work that they've done, and everyone in our buildings, all the work that they've done to maintain that. Great job by our teachers and our support staff to help get our kids to that point where they can do it diligently and without any issues, and thankful to our parents who supported that also. We also recognize that the hybrid learning plan, it's not perfect, but it's worked fairly well for us this year. I think our kids have progressed and learned throughout the school year. Our teachers and staff have done a great job in supporting them and giving them really robust instruction throughout the year. It's been challenging, but it's worked out very well. We were in our hybrid model, running our 2-1-2, so cohort A, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was a remote day, and then cohort B on Thursday, Friday in person. We decided to move to a 3-2-3 model, and I got a few questions on why did we move. It was really about providing more in-person instruction for students. I noticed that, and I heard feedback that our kids were still struggling with having some consistency and that in-person learning opportunities and just being with their friends and teachers in person, on a more consistent basis. So moving to this 3-2-3 model, I felt really brought us a little bit closer. And it also started to prepare them for the shift to more in-person learning in the future, and kind of where we are moving towards right now. Again, recognize fully that it's not ideal, but it does provide that more in-person instruction and opportunities for our kids. So again, thought that was really important. Next slide. So here's really the meat of our discussion. The commissioner yesterday announced that he'll be asking the Board of Education for the authority to determine when hybrid and remote learning will no longer count for learning hours. So what that means is if you run a hybrid schedule where kids are in currently, like in our model, that those hours that they're remote or through the hybrid model would not count towards the learning hours that we're required to do this year. So this is part of a larger plan to begin returning more students to in-person learning in the spring. And that's assuming that the state's health metrics continue to improve like they have over the last, I believe, week and a half or 2 weeks. So that came yesterday. He talked about how this would be a phased-in approach with the goal to bring elementary students back in person learning 5 days a week this April. He also noted that parents would have the option for their children to learn remotely through the end of the school year. So if parents chose to stay remote or be remote, they certainly could. But the goal would be to have students in person learning 5 days per week. So for us, right now, we currently have 6-foot distancing in our classrooms. To move to this more in-person learning, we would have to shrink the distancing between the desks from 6 feet to somewhere to the lower level of around 3. So that's some of the work we need to start doing immediately. So what does that mean? So what's gonna look like in the coming weeks? So we're gonna be sending out some surveys to families starting at the elementary schools for feedback on which model you're choosing. Do you want full remote or are you gonna be full in person? I'm also gonna send some information around pool testing. I'm gonna talk about that in a little bit in some upcoming slides. And we'd like to start that pool testing around March 8th. And then I'll also send additional information as it becomes available. I'll probably end up doing some more webinars so you guys are fully informed of what's going on. The commissioner today held a Zoom meeting for superintendents, and he didn't go into great depth, but he did talk a little bit more about moving into this full in-person, again, starting with elementary schools. The guidance from the Department of Ed and from the Department of Health has always been in Massachusetts, 3 to 6 foot distancing. 6 if doable, 3 is totally fine. There's some studies that have been conducted over the last few months has shown that districts that were in the 3-foot distancing and had low incidence or low transmission within their community didn't create this huge tidal wave of cases within their schools. One example, and just because I know the superintendent over in King Philip, they've been at 3 feet the entire year, and they haven't had a huge influx of in issues in their buildings. So that's some of the data that they're sharing with us right now through the Department of Ed. I don't have all the studies yet. I anticipate in the next couple of weeks they'll be passing those along to us. So a couple of important factors to keep in mind as we think about moving into this 3-foot distancing for our kids. We need to continue to follow the guidance around mask wearing, hand washing, and then quarantining after travel or if we're feeling sick. Those are still important mitigation factors that we have to follow. And also, I think it's really important, and again, I'll talk about it in a little bit, is that we participate in the pool testing program. It's going to help us monitor any potential issues and deal with them quickly so schools can stay open. I know that it's scary And I'll talk a little bit about it in a minute. And I have a couple of videos, or I have one video that I can show. But it is a way for us to keep surveillance of the virus and try to keep it out of our schools. So I think it's really important. And I do have some FAQs that I'll share also. So let me talk a little bit about pool testing, okay? Pool testing, again, it's an additional strategy for surveillance and screening. It increases our capacity to maintain safety for students and staff and to keep the school transmission at bay. It maximizes our in-person learning for students. It allows us to make some data-driven, data-informed decisions, helps to prevent community spread. And this is all based off research too. And it reduces fear and anxiety among staff, students, and families. So pool testing involves mixing approximately 10 to 25 samples together in a batch or a pool, and testing that pool sample with a PCR test. Now the PCR test is that gold standard test that we all talk about when we do testing for COVID-19. So the test would be performed if we're in our cohort model, which we would be around March 8th, would be performed once per week for each cohort, and uses the anterior nasal swab. It's a short swab. So it's not the big long swab that we've heard about or seen on TV or even experienced that goes way up into the nasal cavity. It's a swab that goes literally just in the front of your nose, quickly inside. And again, I'll show a video about that. We send that out for testing. We'll get results back in 24 to 48 hours. Now, if the pool sample comes back negative, great, no worries, we can continue on. But if that pool sample comes back positive, then we take that cohort or that sample of kids and staff, and we have them take an additional test. It's called the BINEX test, and that's an antigen test. And that will determine who is positive within that pool. So now we can more strategically determine who's positive, who those close contacts are, and then do the appropriate close contact quarantine process, instead of trying to now shut down a whole classroom, shut down a whole grade level, or even a whole building. So it gives us a little bit more information and a little bit more opportunity to try to monitor any risk of the virus in the building. And then certain age groups can also take their own samples under supervision. So example would be at the high school. It's, again, a very simple nasal swab that kids can do, high schoolers especially could do on their own. The way we would set up our pools most likely would be by their cohorts or by their classrooms. And that would probably be the easiest way to do it. And it keeps that, we would follow that same pool or that same classroom throughout the weeks of testing. So taking a sample in the classroom. So again, it's a lower nasal swab. It's painless and easy to self-administer. And you can see, again, it's right in the interior part of the nose, right before, right at the beginning. They would turn it around their nose about 4 or 5 times, take it out, put it in a test tube. And here's a quick video. This is from Salem, Mass. They've been doing this for actually a little bit longer than a few weeks. And they created this video I'll share with you right now.
As a superintendent of schools, this has been an unusual time. This has tested all of us in our work, and the way we do work, the way we do school is fundamentally different than we've ever had to do before.
I think that this year has been one of the hardest years for a lot of teachers in teaching.
What we are doing is being very careful and making sure that we are doing everything we can to keep our schools open and make in-person learning possible for our kids, while also trying to make sure that our adults and students are safe. Testing enables this additional layer of finding the virus before symptomatic students might show up or staff might show up, and adding a layer of protection against the spread in schools.
I'm a proponent for, pool testing as much as possible, because I think it helps to identify, pockets of outbreaks sooner. So certainly if we can eliminate, opportunities for spread by testing whole groups of people, I think that that's something that's a benefit for us.
So in homeroom, our students, after they get their bags away, jackets away, get out their Chromebooks, they'll sanitize their hands, grab the swab, put it in their nose 4 times in each nostril. They will then place the swab in the tube, sanitize their hands, sit back at their desk.
We believe that in-person school, giving families that option and giving our children the option of coming into school in person as much as possible is in their best interest.
We can be more proactive about what is happening and what we can control to make sure that everyone's as safe as possible.
For right now, it's just been a pilot, and we've had parents actually involved in this as citizen scientists and helping to figure this out.
I'm hearing from the staff who have been in the classroom that the kids are interested, that they feel, excited about the chance to, participate in research and move something along.
We don't know when the vaccine is going to be available to us. We don't know when our teachers and then ultimately our students will have access. And so we think for the remainder of the school year, having a testing protocol is critical to our ability to continue to function as a school district.
Okay. That actually happens to be the same company, Concentric, that we're going to be working with for our pool testing. So I'm very familiar with what they're doing, and actually can always reach out to Salem for some additional questions if need be. So that's, again, a quick video of what it would look like. So they had their students actually do it in their classroom, go up to the desk and put the sample in the test tube. We're thinking something different. Where probably our nurses would travel from classroom to classroom. A student would come out, do their swab, put it in the test tube and go back to their seat, and the next student would come out. The feedback I've gotten from other superintendents who've been doing this is that once they get the routine in, it's pretty quick and painless, and it happens very quickly. It's a couple of minutes per classroom and they move on pretty quick. So that's good to know.
As a superintendent of schools,
Sorry.
As a superintendent of schools, this has been an unusual time.
Next slide. There we go. So some FAQs. So a couple of weeks ago, I sent out a survey, and I didn't get a lot of feedback or responses, but I did get some really good questions that I wanted to add in tonight's presentation. Will children be tested in pools with their classroom cohorts? Yes. Most likely that's how we would do it. The pool groups will be set up by their classroom assignments for almost all instances. And again, staff and administrators would also be able to participate in the testing. Who will administer the test? Again, I've talked to our lead nurse, Mrs. Loftus, and it's going to be our nurses who are the test takers. In the secondary level, students will be able to administer their own swabs with the nurse present. So again, we also would have to have that supervision. Great question on what is the accuracy or rate of the rapid test like. So the PCR test, the data that I've seen, it's incredibly reliable, close to 95%. The antigen test, again, very accurate, little less for asymptomatic students or staff, but used together, the PCR test and the antigen, the way we would use it in this process, has been what they've seen. It's been very reliable and has worked very, very well. And I can grab more data on those if you'd like. If the pool that my child is part of tests positive, then my child takes their own test and is negative, can they come out of quarantine upon school receiving proof of their negative test? Possibly, yes, right? It depends if they're close contacts or not. So ideally, again, this gives us that ability to be more strategic. We can determine those close contacts much more effectively and quickly, and really minimize the amount of time students would be out of the building. So yes, it is possible that they'd be back sooner, and we set up a process to administer that second test as quickly as possible, again, to have them back in school. Will follow-up testing be provided, or are parents, guardians responsible for obtaining follow-up tests? So the district will conduct that second test. So we do the initial PCR pool test. And then if there's a positive sample, we'll conduct the Binax antigen test. Excuse me. And then, determine who's positive and who the close contacts are. You can certainly, if there are further concerns, you can certainly go to your pediatrician, your primary care physician, and conduct another PCR test if you'd like. So those are options that you would have, but we will certainly do the first and second test. A lot of people asked around privacy, which I think is a great question. So the lab that we're using, Concentric, they receive no information about who's taking the test. They have no idea who's in the pool. No names are given. all samples are labeled with a barcode. So you think about that test tube has a barcode on it, samples go in, we send that out. The school nurse would be the only one with access to the database linking the code to the specific individuals in the pool. The only time we would provide information, it would only go to the state, and that's for the person who tests positive. That's the only information that's provided, and that's at that secondary level after the Binax test. So all other information is private, stays within our district with our school nurses only. I hope that helps to explain. I talked about this a little bit earlier. Is it a different type of nasal swab? Absolutely. It's a short, less invasive swab. Again, just on the interior part of the nose and a quick, 4 swipes on each side, and that's it. And then does this mean we're any closer to returning to 5 days per week? Yes, it brings us to that next step closer. So I did this before the commissioner's information yesterday, but this brings us closer to making that happen, which I think most of us want to happen. We want our kids back full in person because that's what's best for them. I absolutely love this slide. I don't know why. It might be because I like Swiss cheese. I'm not sure. But this is a great representation of what we're trying to do. So you have the virus over here on the left-hand side, and knowing Swiss cheese, right? There's holes in it. And the more layers we can put in between the virus and the individual, the less likely that virus can spread to that person. So that means, again, staying home if you're sick with that distancing, hand hygiene, masks, mask wearing, avoid touching your face, ventilation, testing, quarantining and isolating where needed. And again, also vaccines, right? The more layers of Swiss cheese we can put between the virus and the individual, the less likely they will be to get the virus. So these are important things. And I really wanted to hit home on the pool testing component because it does provide us that data that I think is so important for us to keep our kids in school. I wanted to pause for a minute before I go on to the next slide to see if there's some questions. I think Mrs. Rafferty, you've been jumping in some questions.
I have been. One of the challenges that has come up is that sometimes our participants are sending their questions only to the panelists. So we realize that when we start to answer the questions, they're only saying the answer and not the question. So if all of our attendees could make sure that they send their questions to the panelists and the attendees, and I'll continue to try to answer them as fast as I can. Some of the questions right now coming up has to do with students or families that choose not to participate in the pool testing. What would happen if they chose not to participate?
I'm sorry, can you say that one again?
There are questions that families are bringing up if they chose not to have their child participate in pool testing. So for example, what are some ramifications if we decide not to have our child participate in pool testing? So there's a couple of them with that kind of question.
So there's no requirement that you have your child participate. They don't have to. It's totally voluntary. It's up to you. If you have specific concerns about it, I would say reach out to myself or Mrs. Loftus, our lead nurse, and we can talk to you or answer some of those more specific questions that you might have. But there's no ramifications. There's no consequences for not participating. Your students would still be in school. And still be part of their classroom. So there are no consequences to it.
Some of the other questions coming up, Mr. Morano, have to do with the justification for why 3 feet is acceptable in the schools when not out in the community.
So again, the data that the commissioner shared, and again, it was pretty quick today, but he's been mentioning it for the last few weeks, is that students, especially the younger kids, don't seem to spread the virus. One, don't seem to contract the virus as adults do, nor do they spread the virus as adults do. And listen, I was skeptical also, but looking at some of the data that I've seen through the CDC and through DPH, the studies and the studies will be coming out published soon. That's what they're finding, that kids tend not to spread the virus, especially the younger kids, to adults. And if you look at the cases throughout Massachusetts, there's been very little in-school spread. It's been mostly outside of school where it happens, where kids or adults get the virus. So again, the 3 to 6 feet, and in the 3 feet especially, if you have a low or a low incidence of community spread. Bellingham right now is in the yellow, and I believe tomorrow the map gets updated. Looking at the data recently, I expect us to be in the yellow again. The numbers are trending down, so which in essence means that we have low community spread. And again, that translates to low spread within our schools, if there was spread in our schools.
So just some clarification, Mr. Morano. Quite a few questions have just have just been presented as to if a pool testing gives us a positive result, what's the next step in terms of what happens in terms of quarantining and follow-up testing? And then the other question was, if your child was not part of the pool testing, they don't also have to quarantine. It would be the people who are in that pool testing. So if you could just address the people who are part of the pool testing, that if a positive result comes, what happens next? So
if, let's say we have a classroom of 10 kids, the pool, we do the pool testing, it comes back positive. Our nurses would schedule a time to have those people in the pool come back and take the Binax test to determine if who's positive, and then do the close contact list from there. If someone does not participate in the pool testing, again, which is totally voluntary, but they're part of that class, they would have to quarantine because we wouldn't know unless we can identify them not as a close contact. But if the people who take the Binax test come back and it's all negative, and we have 3 or 4 kids who didn't participate in we don't know, then we'd have to quarantine those kids. So they'd still have to, you're kind of participating in a way without taking the test. It's just, that's the way it would have to work. Does that explain it? So now we take the Binax test, right? We find out who's positive, who the close contacts are. We can bring back students who were negative and not close contacts. And then the ones that were would quarantine, and then we would get them back into school as quickly as possible. And I got a text from Mrs. Loftus. She's actually here. I'm going to make her a panelist because she should be. There you are, Mrs. Loftus.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
You're absolutely right, Mr. Morano. You answered that question beautifully. If a child is not participating in pool testing, but is determined to be a close contact after the positive person is identified, they will need to be tested at home or by their own physician and quarantined accordingly, unless they opt to do the 10-day quarantine with no testing.
Thank you.
Mr. Morano, if I may jump in, this might be for Mrs. Loftus too. There's been a couple of questions in regards to siblings in different schools and different grades, and what happens if one is in a pool that indicates some positive tests that have to be quarantined. What is the impact on that second child in a different school or a different grade?
If the sibling tests positive, the siblings are considered close contacts. So they will have to quarantine from a family standpoint. If the sibling is not positive, but is deemed a close contact, then they become a close contact to a close contact and are not required to do anything unless their sibling eventually tests positive.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Loftus.
I just caught a quick question as I was looking through it. Someone asked, at 3 feet, wouldn't the whole class be close contacts? No, it's really within that 6-foot radius, correct, Mrs. Loftus, of close contact. So you could be on one side of the room positive, everyone on the other side of the room would not be positive, would not be a close contact. So it's within that 6 feet and 15 minutes of within that 6 feet radius of to be a close contact.
Correct.
There are quite a few questions coming up about how quarantining would work when we're back, as we start to move back to full in-person. Would students still have access to remote options if they had to quarantine?
That's a great question, and I don't know yet. I wish I had a better answer. I think there's still a lot of components that need to be worked out. I looked at a couple of, and again, really quick models that I spoke to a group of superintendents today about this, and each one of us have a little different spin to it. So I would really need to meet with our principals. Once we are able to figure out how many students will be coming back to full in person, how many would stay full remote, looking at our staffing, then we can kind of make a model that works for us to support our kids. If they become a close contact or quarantined, we want to make sure we support them educationally. How do we do that? It really comes down to our staffing and our ability to make that work. So something we'll work on once we get more information and have a better understanding of what that looks like. Mrs. Loftus, question I saw a couple of times come up, and I tried to address it real quick. How quickly would the second test be administered?
If the kiddos happen to be in school, we can pull them down to wherever the testing will take place right away. Otherwise, we'll send a phone call home and work that out with the parents. We would like to get it done as quickly as possible.
Thank you. And I failed to mention too that, I did mention that the PCR test takes 24 to 48 hours, but the Binex test is a 15-minute test that comes back.
Correct. Between 15 and 30 minutes, you get the results.
So again, quicker response.
Yep.
All right, let's see. So there are a couple of questions I saw in here around the hybrid model. Is that still an option? The hybrid model, when we start transitioning, so if we start at the elementary level, the hybrid model would not be an option. It would be either full in person or full remote. We wouldn't be able to do both a hybrid model again. And how the commissioner framed it to us is that if you run a hybrid model, you certainly can, but all of that instruction time would not count for time in learning. So we can't do that. So we would have to continue, we'd have to go with a full in-person or full remote model. And again, you have the option between either one.
The other question that's coming up now is the time frame of the rollout of moving back to in-person. As Commissioner Riley had stated, he's looking at early April, starting at the elementary grades. And so that's something, I know a question had come up as to whether we would be considering 4th and 5th as elementary, and we haven't had that conversation yet. We have our first meeting to start discussing this tomorrow.
Correct. Sorry, Mr. Cutler. Mr. Cutler popped out and I need to bring him back in. Go ahead. Were you going to say something? I thought I heard somebody. There we go. Let's see. Someone asked Mrs. Loftus, would you mind reminding us how the metrics look like at this point, as every day there are changes to those metrics?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Maybe within the town or within the school? I think within the town, the metrics have been going down. The number of positive cases have really been reduced. And we haven't had really any cases in the last few weeks.
That's correct. Our big issues these past, before vacation and now after vacation, is just travel protocol. Kids are out quarantining because they went away or they're awaiting test results.
I saw a couple questions on what if a teacher is absent. So each, and the students are in school, will they have a sub or a teacher remote? So we've been able to hire I believe, 2 teachers for every building as permanent subs. We would, ideally, we'd have our subs, be able to cover for those classes, again, depending how long a teacher might be out for or whatever instances there are. But, ideally, we'd have a sub in for a day or 2 and a teacher could come back if they're sick. If they have to quarantine longer, we'd have to look at other options. But we could run either model. There's a couple of questions in here from staff. I'm going to hold off on those questions. We'll do that at a staff meeting. I can answer some of those more specific questions for staff. How would testing groups be set up for high school? That's a great question. I think we talked quickly. One option could be first period.
That's what I think we're going to do, first period. Yep.
I think that would, and ideally we'd stay with the same cohort or the same group every time we test. We would need to do that. So do students still have the fully remote option available, and will full remote hours count? Can you please clarify? Yes. Again, the 2 models, full in-person or full remote. If you are full remote, you can continue that for the remainder of the school year, but only full remote. You can't switch into a hybrid model. But yes, those hours would count into next year. If we dare talk about next year, from what I understand, there'll be only one option, and it'll be full in person. Again, way too early to, fully understand that right now, but that's what we're kind of told would possibly happen. I think I'm way behind on the questions because I see 46 new ones.
Trying to keep up. So some of the questions that are coming up have to do with the complexities of teachers who are now full in person, but there are still remote children at home, and how will that be addressed? So there are quite a few questions around that, and so there's so many variables there that I think it's something that we need to work out in building-based logistics. It's hard to address all of the different variables with that question. And then the last one that just came in, the other one that we'll continue to look at that keeps coming up is the social distancing in the cafeteria with the masks off. So that's something that we are definitely going to have to look at.
And we're supposed to be getting guidance from the commissioner on that in the next couple of weeks. In regards to, just to, again, quickly, in regards to kids who are full remote and kids who are in person, ideally we'd like to run our full in-person program and then have people dedicated just to the full remote. So again, we won't know that until we survey all of you and get some idea of how many people would want to be in person and how many people would need to be remote. So once we get that data, we can provide more information on that. And if you're hybrid right now, can you choose to be in person or remote? Yes, you can choose either model if you're in hybrid right now. All right, I'm going to just go back to the PowerPoint. I only have a few slides left. And then I'll kind of wrap up where we're at. Hold on one second. Okay. So again, my Swiss cheese model. Quick transportation update. We got some new guidance on transportation. So kids will still need to, and drivers will still need to wear masks. We'll need to keep our windows open in the bus at least 2 inches. Again, following the routine cleaning. So that will continue to happen. The regulations did change. So for elementary school children, the capacity limitations and physical distancing requirements on the buses for students are lifted. For middle and high schools, again, those requirements are lifted. But if you're a community with high community prevalence, then we would switch to a little different model where 2 students per bus bench. What they're also telling us is, again, keep the windows open. Keep the windows open. Students should be assigned to a single bus, which we do, and a particular seat. So it's like an assigned seat. And they also asked us to survey families to see if they would transport their students. So you could have that option also to bring your kids to school if you don't want them to take the bus. So that's still an option for parents to take. There's a lot more guidance for transportation. We'll follow up and we'll do a survey down the road to get some more info. Again, just a couple of things. You're going to be receiving a lot more surveys from us in the coming days and weeks. You're going to be getting consent forms for pool testing. We need those back as soon as possible. Those will go out next week. And then I'll do some additional webinars to walk us through some of the new guidance that's provided by the Department of Ed. And again, I anticipate that's going to happen in the next few weeks. And it might be quick. It might be a quick turnaround where I'll get the guidance and maybe a day later have to try to get us into a webinar so I can explain some of the information there. Things are going to progress pretty quickly over the next month. So we need to be, again, really patient and flexible as we think about what the next month will look like into April. There's a lot of changes and moving parts that are going to happen. And I hate sending out all these surveys, but it's the only way for us to really know what your wishes are and what we can do within our schools. Okay. Questions? We'll try to answer a couple more. And then.
Mr. Morano, a couple of questions that keep coming up in terms of if we could talk a little bit about how our custodial staff is cleaning the buildings as we switch to all in and we're moving from having that Wednesday option. Could you talk a little bit more about that? And then also updates on the air purification systems and ventilation. There have been a couple of questions about that I haven't been able to keep up with.
Okay, so our custodians are doing a phenomenal job cleaning our buildings. They've really shifted some of the work that they typically do and focus most of their day on cleaning and sanitizing throughout the day. So talking to some of them, what we found is that, we talked about that Wednesday being a deep clean. They're really deep cleaning every day. So they're spraying doorknobs and handles. They're spraying high contact areas. Our teachers and staff are spraying desks in between. So it's happening constantly throughout the day. So it's not that we don't need that deep clean day anymore, because it happens all the time. And then our night custodians follow through with additional cleaning. So it's happening consistently throughout the week. So I feel really comfortable. Air ventilators. So we do have air purifiers in some of the rooms, especially the ones that don't have windows. We purchased a good amount of them and have distributed those out to staff. And we've also back in, it was right before we opened the building, we had an air study done to our buildings to determine how often the air gets exchanged, to make sure our ventilation system is working appropriately and that our filters are up to snuff. And those things have all happened and are in good working condition and order. And actually our filters are being changed again in the next week or so, as they normally would. So everything is being done appropriately for air ventilation, cleaning, sanitizing on a consistent basis. And we always have our air system checked regularly. Will we know before having to make, a decision about in-person or all remote, if all remote students will have to change teachers? There's a good possibility that they may have to change teachers. But yeah, we'll try to get that info out as soon as we can.
So one of the questions that has come up a couple of times about why we're back only half day on Wednesdays and not full day on Wednesdays, I had answered that earlier on in the list of questions, but I think it got buried a little bit. It's more than just using that time for cleaning. While we have both remote options and hybrid options, the Wednesday afternoon is also used for planning and collaboration for all of the different models that the teachers are trying to balance and coordinate the planning and lesson planning and design for both the hybrid and the remote option. So it's not just the cleaning. So that's why we still have those Wednesdays afternoons in there while we're still in this sort of hybrid remote model.
Correct. So I feel like there's a lot of questions we didn't get to, but what we can do, and I can download the questions, and I can make an FAQ, and we'll probably have another webinar in a couple of weeks, and I can explain further. So I'll capture these questions. We'll sift through them and try to answer some more, and pull up an FAQ for everybody. There's a lot, again, I mentioned earlier, there's a lot that's going to be happening over the next couple of weeks. So, be patient. We're here to support and help you through this. We want what's best for our staff, students, and for everyone. I mentioned earlier, the hybrid model has worked well for us, but again, there is absolutely no substitute for in-person learning. And, there's a lot of data that supports that this has worked, but there's also a lot of data that shows that our kids are really struggling with this hybrid and remote model. So we're going to, take it step by step. We're going to follow all the guidance that's provided to us and do what's right for our kids and for our staff. That's the most important thing. So please, if you have more questions, put them in the chat. We'll do that FAQ. And then Mr. Reed, did you want to follow up or kind of sum up anything at the end?
First of all, I want to thank you for setting this up for tonight, and I want to thank everybody for taking time to participate. Obviously, it's a very important subject matter. As I've been saying it at our school committee meetings, and I mean it wholeheartedly, the last year has been full of unprecedented challenges that our district has had to face. And I'm so grateful to Mr. Morano for your leadership, to our administrative team, to our teachers, our staff, our students, and our families. We've had to completely change the way we do things and how that we deliver education to students in the last year. And it's amazing what has been accomplished. And it's been accomplished because of the great efforts of all the people that I've mentioned, and because people were committed to working together to execute and first of all, create and then execute a successful hybrid plan. And during that last year, you have all accomplished some amazing things. And now we're starting to reach the stage where we're getting ready to enter that next phase and transition. Okay, and this is a good thing. This is a good thing. We know that we need to get kids back, right? And we've all been aware of that. But we always need to be committed to make decisions to do this safely and do it in the right order and with the guidance of professionals. Okay, and with science, frankly. And so that's as we're starting transition to make those decisions, as Mr. Morano, I know and I'm confident is going to be guided by all of those factors. Okay. And so we're going to need to do the things that we've been successful doing together so far. We're going to need to continue to do that. We're going to need to continue, as he said, being patient and working together and being understanding. And I know that Mr. Morano and I know his team is committed, and the school committee is committed to being transparent as we move through this. Okay. So again, I thank everyone for their patience and for their contributions and for the open-mindedness. And this has been a scary year that we've lived through, and the information has rolled out differently. We can look back at decisions we made months ago differently based on the evolution of information. Okay, and unfortunately, that's just the product of we're dealing with such an unprecedented time. So I'm very grateful to our community. I'm very grateful to our staff. Now that brings me to the topic for tonight, though, briefly, the pool testing. I see pool testing from my perspective as a person that's had 3 kids go through the school system, okay, as an important tool, an important resource, perhaps even it may not be too strong to call it a critical resource that is now available to us, okay, an opportunity to identify the virus earlier and to take action earlier, okay, for the benefit being that hopefully that it allows us to keep more kids in school and more staff in school safely, okay, to identify the virus, isolate it earlier, and in a more orderly fashion and quicker. And listening to the information and talking to Mr. Morano and his administrative team and Mrs. Loftus, I'm confident that we can use this tool, safely, okay, confidentially, all right, and productively, okay, and that it will be an important tool. I urge you all to consider it strongly. I hope that you'll participate in it, okay, and I hope that you'll encourage those that that are around you to participate, and if they have questions, to reach out about it, because this is the type of tool that it's better. We haven't spoken of this tonight, Mr. Morano, yet, but the more people that participate, the better. Okay, it makes the data more reliable. It makes it even stronger of a resource. Okay, and so again, I'm confident, as a person that's had children go through the system and the people that are putting this together, okay, that we can do this safely and that we can do this in a manner that ensures confidentiality appropriately so. Okay, and so I hope that you'll strongly consider it. And again, Mr. Morano, thank you for setting this up for tonight. Thank you for giving me a few moments. I'm sorry for perhaps going on a little long, but there's nothing more important than what we're talking about now as we get ready to take this next phase together. So thank you.
Great, thank you. So thank you. I know I just looked real quick. I see a lot of questions from our employees, our teachers and staff. Hang on to those questions. We'll have a webinar or a Zoom meeting with our staff in the near future. I'm meeting with union leadership tomorrow to work through some of the logistics, and we'll hold something in the very near future. So tonight was really geared toward, tonight was geared toward parents and kind of rolling out a plan. I didn't know that the commissioner was going to kind of throw that on us 2 days ago. So, that was a little bit of a surprise, but I'll set something up for our staff in the very near future after tomorrow. So thank you. Again, I'm sorry, Mrs. Lawrence, were you going to say something?
Yeah, a question just came up, Mr. Morano. Is this webinar going to be available through recordings where parents can log back on?
Yep, so I did record it. I will get it up on our website in the next day, along with the PowerPoint that I just shared. And, anyone can come watch it, review it again, anytime they'd like. Great. All right, again, thank you all for attending. Really appreciate it. Stay tuned. There'll be a whole lot more info coming. So hang in there. Thanks.
Thank you. Night, everyone.
Good night.